My name's 𝗝𝗪𝗜𝗡. I just wanted to talk today about a subject in commercial real estate that's not often discussed openly or talked about. And that has to do with passive ownership of commercial real estate, especially single-tenant properties. I threw up today as my background a Wendy's building, and this discussion is actually not about this particular Wendy's, but a different one that I own. In this case, I actually did build this property. My dad developed this property, and it's now in my care to take care of the property and be in charge of. And it's interesting. Wendy's has been a great tenant for us for a long time. They're at the end of their last 5-year option. It's just being exercised right now. And basically, over the last 2 years, I've been approached by an outsourced broker that has communicated with me and has basically been instilling a sense of fear and concern in me. That's been their attempt. And the fear and concern is largely due to, hey, Wendy's might leave. You probably will going to need to re-tenant this property. You should 100% just renew this lease right now. And otherwise, you're going to face really, really terrible problems down the road. It's kind of fascinating to me. This Wendy's happens to be right in my backyard. It's about 10 miles from where I live. It's about 6 miles from the commercial real estate brokerage office that I own. And so much information could be gleaned by the person that's attempting to communicate with me had they just done an internet search and realized, one, I own commercial real estate, two, I own commercial real estate brokerage, I office next to the property, I live in the trade area, I know the asset way better than this person that is, from the far East Coast knows the asset. And the intimidation factor is just, it's never really going to work with somebody like me because I'm totally an informed party in the market. And I know 100 times more about my own market than this person does because they don't know our market. So basically this outsourced broker spent 2 years trying to intimidate and bully me into doing an early renewal. And so often what happens is a typical net lease structure is a 15 or 20-year primary term, and then there's usually 2, 3, or 4, 5-year options after that. In this case, Wendy's did a ground lease with us. It was a 20-year lease, and then Wendy's had 4 or 5-year options, and they just have exercised right now the fourth of the 4 or 5-year options. So they're in their very last one. Now, what the problem is for Wendy's is that they need to make capital improvements to the site. They've actually got this site subleased from Wendy's corporate to a franchisee. And so they've got to guarantee that franchisee some lease term. And so they're getting a little bit anxious. And that's part of the reason that they've chosen to go this route of basically incentivizing an outsourced broker to approach me and try to get it done. The outsourced broker has 100% of their motivation to get the deal done with me. Typically, the way the compensation works is they get paid if they can convince me to get a renewal done. If they can't convince me to get a renewal done, then they don't get paid by Wendy's. So, the incentive is 100% to get them, whatever they need to tell me to say yes to the renewal is what I need to do. Now, the real problem that we've got is that basically over the last 35 years, with the rent escalators, each time that there's a rent escalation, the rent is going up 10% in this instance. And what's happened is over time, those 10% rent escalators have the rent pointing to about here. And really the market rent is about 40 or 50% higher than where the current rent is located. Now, what's interesting is I actually, in this instance, happen to know what the rent spread is. I know what the subtenant is paying, and the subtenant's paying up here. It's even higher. So what's happening is this out-of-state broker is trying to get me to renew at the par value, not even with an increase. They're trying to tell me, hey, look, you don't want this building to go vacant. You should just renew it at the rent rate. So they've wasted 2 years with this, and I've now got the asset manager at Wendy's. So this has now gone out of the assignment of the broker. It's moved back to Wendy's corporate, and I'm just now starting to get reached out to say, hey, look, we would like you to renew the lease. I wanted to hit timeout, and I wanted to help everybody understand who owns net lease single-tenant properties. When this is happening to you, please, please, please do not ever just say yes. The broker that's calling you is not your friend. The broker that's calling you is not looking out for your best interest necessarily. They are hired by the tenant. They are not working for you. So I don't care what's coming out of their mouth. They're not working for you. They're not trying to get you the best deal ever. Take a moment. This is your time to pivot this asset. Once I'm done with Wendy's in this transaction, this lease will now be locked for another 20 to 40 years, and it's probably going to be one of my kids' problems to deal with in 20 or 40 years, not mine. And so this is really a big moment. These net leases come up so rarely with all the options expired that you have got to take your time and take a little extra time and caution. My first recommendation to you, number one, go find a top of market leasing broker, someone local to the market, someone that has knowledge about what's happening. They're going to understand the trends. They're going to understand if there are 3 or 4 tenants that might backfill that building. They're going to understand if the tenant rep broker is bluffing, if they really, don't have an intent to close the store. They'll know so much more info like that. Most of these folks will work for pretty reasonable commissions, and the amount of money you're going to pay them is literally nothing. It is absolutely it's not even close to comparable to what you might end up doing in the event you try to do the renewal on your own. So unless you're a market expert and this is what you do for a living, 100% find a local broker, retain them, come up with a commission structure that works, and then have them help you set a market rate for the building. The next step is the biggest motivator that the tenant rep outsource commission, the outsource broker has, or the in-house real estate person has, is to tell you that the building's going dark. Well, I'm here to tell you, we are at, it's fall of 2024, end of the summer, start of the fall 2024. We have the lowest vacancy rates we've ever had in the country in most trade areas for retail ever. It's almost impossible to bring new space online. That is my daily problem. I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall every day of my life. It is so hard to build new space. We are not going to have an abundance of space for a long time in this country. In the event that you have a drive-through, you have a precious commodity more than likely. You have something that there are more people that want to occupy it than there is buildings available for them to occupy. So in general, just understand on the outset that you probably are in a better negotiating position than you might think. The next step there is to consider, so that's step one, retain a broker. Step two is understand the general market economics from a macro sense of what's happening. Number three is I always like to look at each individual scenario on a one by one. I typically will almost always default back to the tenant that's paid me, and in some cases my family, rent for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I will almost always defer to allowing that tenant to stay in the building. My goal really is to have no rent interruption whatsoever. But on top of that, I have to look at the fact that, look, this is really an ongoing relationship that exists between me and the tenant. In this case, is an ongoing relationship that goes between my dad and now me and this Wendy's. And what you need to do is you need to think about all of that rent that's been paid out from Wendy's to you over the time period that you've owned the asset. And what has that meant to you? And you might be able to get, let's just say the numbers are $100,000 out of Wendy's on a renewal, and maybe somebody else like Popeyes or Dutch Bros or some other tenant might pay you $115,000 or $120,000. Is it really worth the incremental $15,000 or $20,000? And that's what you got to look at, and you got to decide what works best for you. I typically personally default to the tenant that's there. I try to make the best deal I can with the tenant that's in place. And if I can't make the best deal, or if we're substantively off, then I'll look for other options. So that's number three. Number four, it goes back to number one, hire an expert. I cannot reiterate this enough. You have got to go find somebody that knows what they're doing for a living. You're renewing your tenant for at least 20 more years here. Just do it right. Spend the time, pay a little bit of money in a commission. It's no big deal. It's pocket change in comparison to what you're giving up over time. I state this emphatically on repeat. Good tenant rep and good landlord leasing agents are absolutely indispensable, and they're the most underpaid part of the entire commercial real estate process. Hope you enjoyed the video. You are always welcome to ping me anytime if you think I can help you. You're welcome to either message me, and if you have any other thoughts about tenant renewals, please comment below.